Alright, so here's my theory about most of you watching this video. I reckon about 80% of you are like, oh yeah, Ace Combat, I remember that game from the PS2, right? They made a sequel to that? Well, first of all, the series didn't start on PS2, it started back on the PS1 in 1995. And secondly, they didn't make one sequel to it, they made 16, with this game, Ace Combat 7, being the 17th Ace Combat game ever. But I feel you, I'm like you. I have not played a single Ace Combat game since Shattered Skies on the PS2. It's been 17 years since I played an Ace Combat game. Holy shit, I'm getting old. Now, I had no intention whatsoever of reviewing Ace Combat 7 because I honestly just thought the series was some dumb, arcadey fighter jet game, and since that wasn't my jam, I was like, meh, whatever. But in the lead up to the release, a whole bunch of Ace Combat fanboys were spamming my Twitter feed being like, oh my god, Ace Combat, best game ever. So I checked out the subreddit, and what I found was an extremely engaged, passionate community of people who have loved the series for over 20 years. Very few franchises have lasted that long, so clearly there had to be something to all of this. So I got in touch with Bandai Namco, I got a review copy, I booted it up, I sat down, and I thought, alright, let's just hope this isn't too boring. Having spent about 25 hours with Ace Combat 7, I get it now. This is a remarkably well-constructed video game. The key point I want people to take away from this review is that in addition to being a superb flight sim, Ace Combat 7 is also a superbly designed video game, with its level design, objective design, strategic choices, and difficulty curve being absolutely on point. So much so that even though this game drove me absolutely insane at times, and I wanted to throw my controller at the TV, I came to deeply respect this game. You can tell the developers have been making this sort of game for 20 years, because each component is pulled so tautly across the entire canvas of the game. But that probably doesn't make any sense yet, so let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about what Ace Combat actually is. Ace Combat is not a realistic flight simulator game. It's much closer to Star Fox than it is to Microsoft Flight Simulator, though it does mainly use real-world aircraft and technology. Most of the craft you'll fly looks straight out of Top Gun, though there are some more experimental aircraft you gain access to as you progress through the unlock tree. The game has a campaign mode, a multiplayer PvP mode, and a VR mode, which unfortunately is exclusive to the PS4 for at least a year, after which time PC will get it. Xbox users, you guys can play it on HoloLens when it comes out. Just joking, that thing's never coming out. The campaign has 20 missions, which will take you around about an hour each, and 3 VR missions, which run for about 30 minutes each. So you're looking at around 25 hours-ish of gameplay before you head into multiplayer. In terms of replayability, there's a big unlock tree where you can grind out new planes and upgrade parts, and after finishing the campaign, I reckon I unlocked about a quarter of what's on offer. The intention is to continue playing each mission at higher difficulties and earning higher ranks to earn more currency to unlock everything. All told, there's a lot of value in this product for the $60 price tag, and if you're into what it's doing, then there's absolutely no way in hell you're going to feel shortchanged. I played with a PS4 controller, which is sort of okay, however some button combinations require the pressing of both right and left shoulder buttons at the same time, so something like a SCUF controller with buttons on the back really helps. The best solution though is a joystick, which you can get for consoles as well. Given how much I enjoyed this game, I really wish I'd gotten a joystick first because I think I would have enjoyed it even more, but as I said, a controller works just fine as well. So, that's the basics. Let's talk about what makes Ace Combat fun. Say it was the right time. At its core, Ace Combat delivers what no other game on the market does. A flight simulator that gives you the joy of piloting a billion-dollar piece of technology while aiming to shoot down other billion-dollar pieces of technology. And it's free of all the boring simulation shit that most of us just don't enjoy. For enthusiasts, they already have their other games and their lounge room cockpits and whatever. We just want to sit on our couch, do a barrel roll, lock on with missiles and fire away. Ace Combat gives you this freedom, and it feels awesome. The relationship you develop with the game's controls is a very important one to understand and appreciate. The first and most important thing I will tell you is that there are two control schemes. One of them is the real one, and the other one is reserved for that Polygon journalist playing Doom, and that other guy playing Cuphead. This easy mode control scheme removes the yaw and pitch controls, so you can play the entire game with the right joystick, and this is just the worst way to experience this game. You have so much less control over what you're doing, and everything feels way less satisfying. I tried the basic bitch control scheme for the first 2 missions while I got the hang of things, and then I tried the expert after that, and then I went back and redid the first 2 missions again because I was so disgusted with myself for ever having used that novice control scheme. I think I've made my point here, let's move on. I came to develop a great affection for Ace Combat's controls. They really do feel very smooth and responsive at all times. It's difficult to make this point in a way that resonates, so let me just use the example of Spider-Man on PS4. If you've watched the Spider-Man movies, you get a sense of what it would be like to web-sling through the streets of Manhattan, and then the game just perfectly delivers on that. It's just perfect. It's the same with Ace Combat and the joy of flying a fighter jet. You pick up the controls, and through every barrel roll and last minute pull up and nosedive and bombing run, you just feel completely connected to the aircraft, and you start to get a sense of its weight and how it moves and how it shifts with your maneuvers, and what each craft is capable of. This feeling is augmented with the game's upgrade system. In addition to each plane having its own baseline stats, you can also buy and install upgrades that change the way your aircraft performs. Generally, these are either in the maneuverability or the firepower departments, and since you can only have so many upgrades installed, you need to choose which to invest in. Do you want to be able to barrel roll faster, or turn left and right quicker, or accelerate and decelerate more rapidly? And the impact of those upgrades can immediately be felt when you apply them. It's not just window dressing, and in some missions, it can have a very real tactical implication on your mission, but we'll come back to that later. So, right now you're probably thinking, cool, it's a flight sim game where the controls don't suck. Yes, but there's a lot more. I fucking hated Ace Combat 7 for about the first third of it. Then in the next third, I started to understand it, and by the last third of it, I really respected how well its missions were designed. Let me be super clear about this. This game is really hard. Like, oh my god, this game pushed me in a way that few games have ever pushed me. But like all great games, I realized along the way that each failed mission was entirely my own fault, and that there are at least half a dozen things I could have been doing differently to improve my chances of success. We need to break down this difficulty theme because it's actually the most fascinating part of Ace Combat for me, and it's the reason I came to respect it so much. There are so many layers to its difficulty, and each of them are so precisely tuned that it always feels like you're carefully threading a needle during each objective. The first thing to discuss is the pre-mission briefing.
First, I want you to head from the base to the desert region of Roca-Roja to the northwest. And then second, you will attack the large Erusian base there.
In a lot of other games, you can just ignore this shit, as it's the usual military-style patter. Here, the briefings provide crucial information about what you're going to do, and if you aren't paying attention to that, you will likely miss the entire point of the mission and end up failing. They also have a huge impact on your loadout choices for each mission. For example, a mission briefing might tell you that you're going to attack a fleet at sea. Now, if you aren't paying attention, you'll just pick any old aircraft with any old weapon loadout, and you'd almost surely fail the mission. Instead, if you selected a plane that carried the anti-naval missiles, and you use specific parts to boost the power of those missiles, then that mission becomes much easier because you can basically one-shot any naval vessel. This leads to the second layer of the difficulty equation, listening to radio commands and doing what the fuck you are told.
It looks like some oil tankers loaded with oil got away. HQ saw them on satellite. Burn down everything that turns up. Why are they popping on and off of radar? Sand clouds. Sand breaks up here and there. That's when radar picks them up. If you detect something, strike fast.
Ace Combat 7 provides a huge amount of mission information over radio calls, and if you aren't paying attention to those calls, you will absolutely fail the mission. I think I've kind of wired my brain to tune out of in-game radio chatter, since I'm conditioned to just sort of wait for it to finish and then I look at the HUD for instructions, but it's not like that here. The HUD and the mission markers very often do not provide you with information about what you need to be doing, so you actually need to listen, and thinking is critical. For example, this mission here was so frustrating for me because I just kept failing over and over again. Turns out that I need to focus on killing the ground units, and that all the stuff in the sky that I was killing didn't mean shit. The HUD didn't tell me that, the radio did. The third part of the difficulty equation is the puzzle-like nature of each mission. This is so great. So when I think about Ace Combat games, because I haven't played one in years, I see something that looks kind of dumb and one-dimensional, like fly around and shoot 30 targets out of the sky and bomb 20 targets on the ground, return to base and you're done. But again, it's nothing like that. Each mission has a very specific set of objectives to complete and a very specific way that they must be completed if you're to meet the mission timer and survive. Let me give you 2 examples. The first is this mission, where I need to take out radar satellites on mountaintops. And I need to stay below the cloud cover to do that, otherwise I get hit by this really strong missile that targets me and whatever. So the entire mission is about staying low and then popping out of the clouds to strike, and then quickly disappearing beneath the clouds before you can be targeted by that missile. Thing is, when you get to one tower, you'll learn that the most obvious path of approach is also the worst one, because it sends you up and over the mountains and then into a spot where there's no cloud cover afterwards, leaving you exposed for too long.
Missile.
Spare 15 was shot down.
So instead, what you need to do is you need to carefully go around the back of the mountain and then approach it from the other direction. This gives you enough cloud cover to dive back down again after you strike, and then you're safe. See, I told you this wasn't just some dumb arcade shooter. The other example that really stands out is when you're tasked to destroy a fleet, and you can target the AA guns and SAM sites on these platforms, but eventually you'll realize that you can take out these entire platforms themselves. It's very tricky because it requires a very specific line of approach, but when you do it, it's very satisfying and it becomes the most efficient way to reach the score requirement before the timer ticks down. Every single mission, of which there are 20, has this unique puzzle-solving component to it. This is why I am glad I played this game, because I was honestly so impressed at how carefully constructed each mission was, and how satisfying it was to arrive at the right solution for the puzzle that was that mission. This isn't just about shooting shit, it's about being smart, it's about being strategic, and beating a mission feels like bringing down a boss in something like World of Warcraft. And just like WoW, there will be attempts. Oh man, get ready to be replaying missions over and over again until you figure them out. You might look at a game like this and think, yeah, cool, probably heaps of checkpoints, should be fine, no problem. No. Ace Combat models itself on the old 2D side-scrolling games like GRIS. You have 3 lives and you need to clear the mission. If you die, you go right back to the start, except in Ace Combat, the missions aren't 3 minutes long, they're upwards of 20 minutes long, often with no checkpoints whatsoever. The average mission duration is around about 20 minutes, but it took me an average of about an hour to beat each mission, and some of them took me nearly 2 hours. Now maybe I'm just bad at video games, or maybe I'm bad at Ace Combat games, or maybe it's both. But I suspect that most people will have a similar time to me, because most of the time spent was figuring out the failure points for each mission, dying, trying again, and then getting to the next failure point, and so on until I had the mission beat. Again, very much like a boss battle in a game like Fury, where you learn by dying. The final part of the difficulty equation is one that drove me really nuts, and that's the combat. So in Ace Combat, your bread and butter is locking onto enemies with missiles and firing. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. You'll eventually get better at positioning yourself and knowing when to take a shot, particularly as it comes to bombing runs, but all this is fine, it all works. But just as you have lock-on missiles, so too do your enemies. And you're always outnumbered about 5 to 1 in missions, and you are constantly under missile lock-on. And it makes this sound that just bores into your brain to the point where when I logged off after each session, I could still fucking hear that sound. My god, it's like this ironic form of torture, and no, you cannot turn it off in the menus because I tried.
Missile.
Locked on bandit.
Missile.
Enemy on your back.
Missile.
Missile away.
Missile.
This is Flight Leader.
shut the fuck up.
The number of enemies in each mission is actually really well done because it always just feels like the right number to keep pressure on you, and you can choose to engage them and reduce that pressure, but doing so costs you valuable minutes on the clock, or means that you're not shooting at an important mission target. So I get why all these enemies are needed, but unfortunately the only way to avoid this endless missile lock-on is to just keep flying in circles like an idiot. There's literally no other way that I've discovered other than just flying erratically. You can risk a barrel roll at the moment of impact, but this fails way too often, and given how punishing the mission checkpoints are, I just didn't want to risk it, so flying in circles was what I did. Endlessly. If you end up hating Ace Combat, it will probably be because of how repetitive this part of the combat loop feels. There's just so much of this erratic mid-air chicanery that it does wear you down, especially on hour 2 of a mission that you've already failed 4 times and you have 5 bogeys on your 6 and you just want to take out some bombers before they reach the mainland and you just constantly hear this missile, 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 missile. I'm already having like PTSD. I don't see a solution to this problem, given that it's pretty hard baked into the game, but yes, it's a real make or break component of the experience. It definitely broke the experience for me sometimes, but the overall experience of the game ended up being worth it, so I pushed through it. Your mileage may vary. Okay, let's begin our descent. The soundtrack in this game, oh my god, it's so good. It is soaring, it is heroic, it is just hype. I can't get my hands on it for this review because it hasn't been released yet, but I absolutely loved it, and some of those tracks got me through some of Ace Combat's most frustrating moments. It was totally awesome.
Has a radar lock on me. It looks like a ship is trying to escape from the lower level.
Looks like we caught him by surprise.
Cyclones 4, launch that attack.
Story.
One of the things people think about Ace Combat before playing the game is that it's just a fly shooter, that the story is not important. But as you will see, the story is actually very important. Probably one of the best points in an Ace Combat game is you ask fans all around.
Now, I'm sure I'm going to piss off a lot of Ace Combat fans here, but the story really didn't do much for me. I know the Ace Combat community is really proud of how crazy and geopolitical and anime the story gets in previous games. I actually started watching this 25-minute video from this guy explaining the backstory of the game. But then I gave up when I saw this was part 1 of 2 and that there was another 25-minute video waiting for me. Clearly, the story is serious business, but perhaps I've just joined too late in the series to let it really mean anything to me. I was expecting Evangelion meets Metal Gear, but what I got was basically kind of watered down Metal Gear, and all the cutscenes are really bland because it's just mainly stills with voiceover, and it's so melodramatic without being at all self-aware. Like this.
His real name is Mihai Dumitru Margarita Corneliu Leopold Blanca Carol Aeon Ignatius Raphael Maria Nikitas A. Shalaji.
The cutscenes also feel really disconnected from the missions you're doing for the first 2/3 of the game. They do bring it together at the end, but the story revolves around people other than you, the pilot. And since you don't really feature into the whole familial and military intrigue until later in the game, it just feels awkward, like the cutscenes and the game were made completely independently from each other. There is a lot of storytelling that takes place during missions over radio chatter, but I'm typically concentrating so hard on my mission objectives that I kind of forget to appreciate all of this stuff. But please, do take my view on this with a grain of salt. As I said, I'm new to the franchise, and it's possible that this is a genius continuation of the story that fans will love, but I can say with a fair amount of confidence that if you're new to Ace Combat, it's unlikely that this story will resonate strongly with you. Okay, so there's one final part of the game that I need to share with you, and it's this. This is the VR component of Ace Combat 7. It is by far and away the best VR experience I've ever had. I played it after finishing the campaign, and I just cannot explain how utterly transformative it was to be able to crane my neck and look up at a target that goes out of my line of sight. It is a complete game changer. Plus, having to look at my dash for my radar just blew my mind. I was like, where's the menu? Where's the menu button? How do I bring up my radar? Of course, it was right there, and having to glance down on it while also looking up and around and out and down. Oh man, it was so good, so awesome. Just totally blew me away. If you have a PSVR, then I almost recommend picking up this game on sale just to try out this one part. It was honestly that good. As for the multiplayer, I can't pass judgment on it because it wasn't available during the review window. I'll leave that to other people to comment on, but I will say though that I'm actually not particularly interested in playing it because I don't love the dogfighting component of Ace Combat, and that's what the multiplayer is built around. What I love are the incredibly well constructed, extremely challenging campaign missions that push me in a way that I never would have expected to have been pushed when I first started playing Ace Combat 7. Few games you'll play manage their design and difficulty components as expertly as Ace Combat does. I didn't love Ace Combat 7, but I did respect it a lot, and it gave me a wholly unique experience, completely apart from the shooters and RPGs and open world games to which I've become accustomed. As someone who really loves video games, I feel like I've enlarged my love of the medium because I've got to see something totally outside my wheelhouse, and something that was totally excellent. If you're looking for something challenging and different, I'd really strongly recommend giving Ace Combat 7 a go. It's a very, very worthwhile title.
Separately engage in direct attack. Bandit on your 6. Say goodbye.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe, and if you want to support the work that I do, check out my Patreon. Thanks again, and see you next time. Bye-bye.